Hello and welcome to the show. For this week's FailRace versus the community, we were to go racing with B-class cars fitted with drag tyres. That means tyre wear would be very, very high, and tyre management strategy and so on actually very important. To add an extra layer of difficulty, because I do like to do that with these sort of racing, the cars must weigh 3,000 pounds or higher. Now, in general, we've done this kind of event in the past. The lighter the car is, generally the better the tyre life is. Everyone runs as light a car as possible. So by forcing people to run relatively heavy cars in terms of Forza, and certainly in terms of this kind of event, makes extra challenge for trying to keep your tyres to run that little bit longer, and certainly to build the car. Do you try and build a fast car but run the risk of it chewing through its tyres quickly, or do you compromise your build to try to save, or hope that it will save its tyres better but potentially struggle with lap pace? Still in the opening stages of the race, of course, plenty of on-track action going on as everyone's shuffling their way through the order. The Nissan making a move on a Camaro out of the final turn. The Ford here having a look around the outside at turn 1. Now, driving on drag tyres isn't a huge difference to normal tyres. What you tend to find is a lot better traction. However, as the Deluxe so eloquently shows, you do struggle with a little bit of understeer. Of course, these tyres designed to launch cars in a straight line, not so much to have the lateral grip around a corner. They're not too terrible, though, to drive with. I was actually one of the few cars that was having a few issues with oversteer in my Mustang. However, I was at the front of the field. A Land Rover had held on to the lead for the opening couple of laps. However, coming under increasing pressure from my Ford, the MX-5 was making a move on the Firebird behind, and the Land Rover just not quite able to get the car turned for that particular corner. I didn't have to go for a big dive bomb. Lime Rock is a difficult track to overtake at the best of times. The MX-5 wanted to have a little bit of a sniff at the inside, couldn't quite get the move done there on that Land Rover. Yeah, not an easy track to overtake around here, but helps when the vehicle ahead just runs that little bit wide. Wouldn't take long for the MX-5 to move up into second. And as we're starting to get towards the halfway stage of the race, tyre strategy was, or pit strategy was going to be an interesting one. You see, you could try and pit a little bit early. By pitting, a lap or so before, maybe even 2 laps before some of the competition, you would get your car in, you would get it on some nice fresh tyres, you could try and do an undercut. So you'll be running around on good tyres while the other guys are struggling on very, very worn tyres. You'll be going quicker. When they come in for their pit stop, you will hopefully be ahead of them. The danger that you run in doing that sort of strategy is that you've got to make sure you have your tyres good enough to complete the race. This was only a 12-lap race. However, if you pit it a little bit too soon, if you pit it on lap maybe 4, you are going to have completely wrecked tyres by the end of the race. Or, I don't actually remember what lap these things are going in on, but you pit on lap sort of 5 or 6, you might even run the risk of getting very, very close on tyre wear towards the end of the race. You also, if you pit early, might get dumped back out into traffic. The Firebird does a little bit, but it's something to be aware of. Up at the front, and while the MX-5 did chase me for a little while, the Mazda actually had some quite big tyre wear issues. Had to drop back, gave me a bit of breathing space. The Mustang, very kind. Very, very kind, my SVT Cobra, on its tyres. The Mazda, though, would dive into the pits. One of the surprises for me, the Land Rover could actually run quite a long time on its tyres. Now, okay, yeah, every vehicle in here is relatively heavy, but I wasn't expecting the big SUV to be able to keep its tyres alive in the way that it did. Was perhaps struggling a little bit for pace, was being caught by a very, very fast Infiniti. Difficult to overtake through these first corners. Looking around the outside, not going to find much luck over that part of the track, and the Land Rover can just sit on the inside of the course, making it quite tough for that Infiniti to find a way past. But it would be very, very similar moment to how I passed that Defender as we head up towards the hill. The Land Rover just got stuck a little bit on the outside. I think the Infiniti was going to dive him anyway, but running a bit wide on that corner is not a particularly good one. As I said, tyre life on my Ford was absolutely fantastic. I made it, I think it was about lap 8 that I came into the pits. My hope was that while, yes, I might have got undercut a little bit by some of the other vehicles, I would have fresh tyres at the end of the race. By running longer, I was going to have great conditioned tyres, and I had a car that was kind to my tyres, pushed hard all the way until the end of the race. I was a little bit more cautious coming into the pits than a lot of other vehicles were. I know that if you're in the first pit stall in here and you come flying in full speed, you will drive straight past it and won't get serviced. You don't know what pit stall you have until you try, so I didn't want to risk it. My tyres would have been wrecked, and of course you lose a heap of time. So I was a little bit slow on the way in, and yeah, combine that with the undercut effect, the MX-5 would inherit the lead. It actually had a bigger margin than I was expecting him to have. I actually got spat out right alongside that Infiniti. The undercut also worked for the Firebird, put him up into fourth place, ahead of the Land Rover. Now for me, having just got dumped out on some tyres, I was having to try and defend against that Infiniti, and unfortunately a little bit too much understeer. One of the quite difficult things, you go from driving a car with very, very worn tyres and you kind of get used to that handling. You suddenly get it out on new tyres and everything's all different. Try to sort of adjust to that. I didn't quite do it quick enough, and the Infiniti would find a way past. For me, it wasn't quite a complete disaster. There were still some laps to go, and I hoped that I would have good tyres to the end of the race. Maybe the cars ahead of me would not. Some vehicles were seriously struggling with making this race on just a single stop. The Honda Civic here was one of them, him fighting with a Jaguar E-Type. The Jag going for a very different strategy of taking it slowly but not having to stop at all. The Mercedes sees an opening as the Civic is struggling with understeer and having to come into the pits for his second stop. Mercedes sees an opening, gets two cars in one go. Fantastic pass from the 190. The E-Type is just trying to stay out of trouble. He's trying to go slow enough and conserve his tyres enough. Not quite working out for the Jag. It wasn't a fast enough car overall, or the sort of the speed you had to go at to keep the tyres alive was far too slow to be competitive with the front runners, but still relatively up the order for the lead, and the MX-5 was gradually being caught throughout the latter stages of this race. The Infiniti had a big go up the inside at the penultimate corner, couldn't quite make that move stick. Unfortunately for me, while I had good tyres and these guys were struggling on the final lap, I made a couple of mistakes trying to push and catch up to them, which dropped me too far back in the end to do anything about it. The MX-5 would go on to take victory, although massively struggling with tyres by the very end of the race. It was enough. It was enough to win ahead of that Infiniti with my Ford coming home in third. The undercut for the Firebird in the end wouldn't work. He killed his tyres too quick, had to make a second stop and would fall back down to 9th place. This Jaguar would claim an 8th, having managed to do the entire race without stopping. A difficult feat. It can be done. You know, you have to run very, very slowly to sort of preserve the tyres. I think it was some 4 or 5 seconds a lap down almost on some of the pace by the fastest cars. But still got a solid top 10 position, not having to come into the pits yet, beat the Firebird at the end of the day. We move on to our second race, heading out to the Sonoma NASCAR layout. I was a lot more buried in the pack in this one. We were actually expecting really, really high tyre wear around here. Lime Rock had absolutely murdered tyres. A relatively short lap at Lime Rock, and that had really, really killed some tyres. We were expecting very, very high tyre wear at this particular circuit. I got stuck on the outside of 3 wide at the first corner, managing to just about make it work. I was fighting with a BMW. I think it was an Audi that dropped back into line. I'm still on the outside as we bounce and wiggle our way across the curb. Amazingly, nobody went visiting too far across the grass in all of that. I had a little bit running wide, a little bit forced out wide, a number of cars at the next corner as we all still continue to battle. Someone up ahead to check up, and the whole field gets a little bit Constantinaed into the next corner. Managing to stay out of trouble on the most part in the Ford, but I hadn't really been able to make the progress through the field that I was hoping. When there's a lot of cars still trying to fit too wide as we go into the incredibly fast S's. Now, all of this wheel-to-wheel battling and overtaking and so on, not so great on the old tyre front. We had another SUV running in this one, even bigger than the Land Rover, a mighty Jeep Cherokee. Grand Cherokee was taking part here. Actually had a decent turn of pace about it as we head down this short back straight. Spots a gap on the inside of a Holden, and that will have a dive up the inside there. Again, I wasn't expecting... Well, I had seen that Land Rover had done relatively well on its tyres at Lime Rock. This, a very different circuit, was expecting the Jeep to have some troubles with its tyre wear. While, you know, everyone's got to run vehicles over 3,000 pounds. My Ford was certainly just over 3,000 pounds. The Cherokee likely to be an awful lot heavier than that. Nissan 370Z was absolutely flying his way through the order, having so a little bit higher up than me, but not too far up. Was quickly up into the top 3, and that'll be a pass for second place on the Firebird there. It's yeah, kind of we were hoping that the Nissan would kill its tyres with the speed, because not many cars really had an answer to that 370. I mean, the Firebird tried to fight back through a couple of corners, but couldn't really do anything about it. And this thing could carry so much more corner speed. Wasn't that fast in a straight line, but could carry so much more corner speed than the rest of us. Now, I was stuck in the middle of a lot of traffic. Tyre wear actually hadn't turned out to be as terrible as initially thought, and had I not been fighting so hard in the opening battles, I was wondering if I could have done this race without having to stop at all. Tyre wear really was that good on the Ford. However, too much arguing in the opening laps. I had ruined the tyres a fair bit at this stage. You can see, we're very, very much stuck in traffic. So I decided to go for a strategy change. Rather than running as long as I had at Lime Rock, hadn't quite worked out for me. I was going to be the one to try and go for a rather aggressive undercut. I knew I had the tyre life, or I hoped I had the tyre life, I should say, to get away with it. I think I was the first car to come into the pits here. So my hope, I'd get dumped out into clean air, not have to worry about battling in traffic. I think a BMW also came in at this stage. But I could get out in clean air, run around on my own with nice fresh tyres, and hopefully be able to make up time on the leaders and still be able to make it to the end of the race. Leading the way was a Dodge Dart. That, though, was coming under increasing pressure from the Nissan. The bigger problem, though, for the Dart was the tyre life. It was not lasting very long. While the tyres were surviving better here than they were at Lime Rock, it still wasn't good news for that Dart. Him having to dive into the pits, and it was going to have to be a very long stint for the Dart if he was to make it to the finish line. That would give the Nissan the lead. You can see second, third, fourth, fifth, all running relatively close on track. So yeah, there was this kind of group stayed together for a large majority of the race. Not a huge amount of overtaking at this stage in the race. Now there were a couple of cars trying different strategies. Most vehicles coming in at the halfway stage. The BMW here was going to go for a longer first stint, have good tyres at the end of the race. The Z4 was going to be even braver than that, and that was trying to go without stopping at all. I had seen when I was behind the Z4 briefly that he was taking it relatively easy in a couple of places, and yeah, was an interesting strategy. We didn't know if it was going to pay off. For me, the undercut had worked. Certainly, regards to my gap to the RX-8, I had made up a fair bit of time. It was all going to be how close I could get to that group with the Jeep, the Astra, and the Firebird. I had been a fair way back when I dove in the pits. I would leapfrog the likes of the Holden and so on. I'd hoped I might be right on their bumper. I was a little bit further back than I would have liked. However, you can see the amount of gain that I got from the undercut. Now, there is a problem. To do that, I had to drive the car incredibly hard. I had to try and make the most of the fresh tyres. I had to make the most of the clean air. And I had driven it very hard, and I had worn the tyres out a fair bit more than perhaps ideal. I still thought I was going to be okay, but I'd driven it very, very hard and hadn't been able to actually leapfrog the cars ahead. I got close to them, but I was then still going to have to fight my way through them as well. There was a little bit of sort of follow the leader further back in the race. In all honesty, there was a fair group of cars that were kind of close enough to see each other, but not close enough to really have a pass. The Porsche, though, spotting an opportunity to have a big go up the inside at the final hairpin. The Supra quick in a straight line, but was really struggling with some of these corners. Could have been struggling with excessive tyre wear, but the Porsche saw his gap up the inside, got the pass out. You can see how much the Supra is closing through the first corner there, but there's just nowhere for it to really work, and that Porsche has got so much corner grip that yeah, it wouldn't really work having a big old dive up the inside. The BMW continued to lead without having taken a trip to the pit lane, but was having to drive very conservatively. Now, the downside of this strategy, yes, you can make the tyres last till the end of the race. That's not a problem, but it's how slow do you have to drive to make them last till the end of the race. If you have to drive so slowly, the cars that have come to pit are going to be able to leapfrog you. Now, you have a fairly big advantage. You can just see the Nissan in the background starting to hunt him down, but yeah, and if you've messed it up, if you hit 100% tyre wear, your car is done for. It will make corners in such horrendously slow speeds that it will not take long at all for a very, very quick car to catch up with you. So yeah, you've got to balance that all very, very carefully indeed. However, the Z4 did the job. The Z4 was able to make it without having to take a trip till the pit lane. It was slow on the final couple of laps. It needed to be. However, the tyres never got to the 100% mark, and he was able. You can see the Nissan in the background there, catching towards the hairpin. The Nissan was absolutely flying. It's an incredibly fast car. However, The Z4 judged it perfectly and would go on to take victory. As I said, I suspect my Ford probably could have done had I not fought so hard in the early stages and pretty much wrecked my tyres in all of that, or did a lot of damage to them to the point where I couldn't achieve a race without stopping. The Nissan, coming home in second, not had enough time to catch up to that BMW. Third place would be an interesting one. I had got to the front of this group, but in doing so, my tyres were in a lot of trouble. Having got to third, I was then trying to back this group up as much as I possibly could. I needed to drive fast enough so that they couldn't overtake me, but I needed to back them up because I needed to try and keep my tyres alive till the end of this lap. I just pushed it too hard in the Mustang. I pushed it too hard for too long and ruined the tyres. The problem was I was now really struggling to get my car turned, and as best as I was trying to defend, I hadn't realised quite how much the tyres had gone off, and that opened the door for the Jeep. He would fire up the inside. Again, trying to fend him off as best I could, but it wasn't quite working, and the more I'm trying to fight and trying to defend, then the other vehicles would just be catching quicker. The Firebird gets to the inside at the S's. The BMW, having pitted late, had better tyres than all of us and had caught us up very quickly at the end of this race. As we head in towards one of the fastest corners, one of the scariest corners on the track, I got a little bit of a hurry-up bump from the BMW. I wasn't massively appreciative of that one, so promptly throw my car up the inside into the final corner. My front tyres were completely shot, though. I had no brakes going on either, so a little bit of a bump on the Firebird, gets away with no harm done there. The Jeep would take the third place. Incredible the Jeep managed to keep its tyres alive, as well as all of the other vehicles pretty much in the field. My undercut strategy had worked. It had got me track position in the end, however, asked too much of the tyres. There was just too much tyre wear going on. I didn't hit 100% tyre wear. I think it was 97 I crossed the line on, as the Jeep hits me a little bit, the good old driver tires. But yeah, it was a different strategy. I gave it a try. Almost worked out for me. Almost, not quite that. Our final race, and we would head to the Brands Hatch GP circuit. We're going to get 4 wide off the start line. That is not the nicest place to be, and I'm stuck in the middle as we head through turn 1. Now, having seen that tyre wear had been good at Sonoma, and having seen the Z4 win the race without having come to the pits by driving safely early on, I was going to try that strategy. Of course, had no idea what tyres would be like around Brands, so for this opening lap, I wanted to try and save the tyres as much as I could while keeping myself vaguely in competitive position. If I fall all the way to the back of the field, yeah, I can save lots and lots of tyres, but I may well be too far back to be able to take a victory. And if it turns out tyre wear was quite bad, I fall all the way to the back and I'm going to have to make a stop anyway, that strategy's not going to work. So I took an approach of kind of cautious racing, which is a bit of a strange one to try and do, as I was fighting with all sorts of vehicles up the inside of a Jaguar here. Yeah, I was trying to, make up positions when an opportunity arose, not have any crazy lunges, not get the car going sideways, not do ridiculous stuff with the Ford, but if an opportunity arose, go for an overtake. Don't defend horrendously aggressively, but again, if I can place my car where I want it to, I am going to. At the front, and it was a battle between the 370Z and a Rolls Royce. Yes, the Rolls Royce was actually leading the way and trying to make life difficult for that Nissan. The Rolls very quick down the straights, however, no match for the grip of that 370Z. Once again, the Nissan's so stupidly fast through the corners. It's around the outside of 2 corners to get past the Rolls Royce. The Rolls, as I said, good straight line speed down here, thinks about having to go at the inside, but knows that there is not really going to be a huge amount that he can do down that corner. It's too far back to really have a proper fire up the inside, and that would put the Nissan into the lead here. But of course, it's still all going to be about how the vehicles are going to be managing with their tyres. I, trying to race conservatively, found myself in a huge battle for position. The RX-8 having a go up the inside into turn 1. Again, not too fast. If the Mazda wanted to come and find a way past, then I was more than happy to let him do that. There was a gap for me on the inside of the Corvette that I thought I'd have a little bit of a go at. Corvette actually runs quite deep under braking. Still a gap for me to keep my car alongside. Mercedes was behind that, a Supra as well. I'm around the outside, a little bit across the curbs, across the dirt, but it would work for the Mustang, move me up a position. And yeah, in all of this, I was not causing too much problems for my tyres. Amazingly, somehow I was managing to make it work, and I found myself in a nice little bit of clean air, and it was starting to come up towards the halfway distance of the race, starting to come up towards the point where vehicles were going to have to start pitting. The cars ahead of me would have to start pitting, and I was hoping I wasn't going to have to fight with anybody anymore in this race, and I could just focus on driving as quick as I could while saving the tyres as and where I can. The Land Rover was back and again running relatively well up the order, coming under fire from a Dodge Dart. A BMW had got himself in trouble at the final corner, was going to drop into this tussle as we run through turn 1. BMW clobbers the curb on the inside, gets fired up onto two wheels. Horrible curbs here at Brands, and that would leave a gap on the inside up to the second corner that the Dodge Dart would be very keen to fill. The Land Rover spotted opportunity as well. The all-wheel drive acceleration of the corner from that Defender was very, very impressive, and he would fire his way back past the BMW. Not a good corner for the BMW. That's all it takes, you know, bounce off a curb a little bit awkwardly, end up out of position, and cars will come steam training past, even when they're running on drag tyres. At the front, Nissan continued to lead, had a pretty massive margin as well, back to second place, and it would be the 370Z that would lead the vehicles into the pit lane. The tyre wear, again, hadn't actually been as terrible at Brands as you might have expected. Again, a much longer lap here than we saw at Lime Rock, but yeah, tyre wear wasn't quite too terrible. A lot of vehicles choosing to come into the pits on this lap. The Dart and the Infiniti choosing not to. There was a 240SX, my SVT, of course, that was trying to go till the end, didn't. But yeah, a fair few vehicles came in on this lap. The Rolls-Royce was in, the Land Rover was in, a couple of others. Now, the problem with trying to make it a lap further was that, yeah, your cars didn't always last. This was a 9-lap race, so the Nissan pitted at the end of lap 4. Most vehicles have wanted to make it to the end of lap 5 because, you know, you made it over half distance. You won't have to pit again or risk running out of tyres. The Mercedes tried to make it to the end of lap 5, but it didn't work for him. His tyres gave up with a couple of corners to go. Actually caused a little bit of grief for the 370Z. Luckily, the Nissan are able to get out of all of that. The Mercedes managing to limp his way into the pit, but yeah, in trying to make it that little bit further, you end up killing the tyres, and yeah, not quite so good for the car there. I was, well, inheriting the lead as everyone came into the pits. The Supra was actually giving me some concerns. The Supra was running very, very late into the race. While almost everyone had pitted on lap 4 or 5, I think the Nissan opted to go for lap 6. The Supra kept going until lap 7, and I was slightly cautious. I was slightly wary that the Supra might be trying to go through the entire race without stopping as well. And yeah, that gave me a bit of concern. In the end, he did peel off into the pits to get some fresh tyres. Now, for the Toyota, he would have lovely, lovely new tyres all the way to, I say lovely new tyres, but much better conditioned tyres till the end of the race than the rest of the vehicles around him. Had dropped him a fair way down the order. You know, he was in the mid-pack. However, having good tyres till the end of the race with other vehicles potentially struggling towards the end is a viable strategy. Is a viable strategy indeed. In second now was the Nissan, with everybody having cycled through with their pit stops. The 370Z was up into second and hunting me down quickly. I had a big lead. I had a huge lead, having not pitted. However, the Nissan was very, very fast indeed. Equally, the Nissan had troubles of its own, in a sense. You know, the Nissan pushes too hard, he could end up killing his tyres before he ever gets to me. If he doesn't push hard enough, and I don't run out of tyres, then he'll have to settle for a second place once more. Another vehicle that made the late stop work, the Nissan, the 240SX, having stopped a couple of laps later than the cars he was racing on, well, tyres that were working. The vehicles that came in on lap 4 were in a world of trouble. Were in almost as much trouble as I was at the front. The Rolls-Royce was still relatively well up the order. However, as they came onto the final lap, that was the Rolls-Royce done for. The tyres were just shot on that car. It was really, really struggling. Not quite at 100% just yet here, but had nothing left to fight with. The Nissan would pick up another position. Once your tyres are gone, there is nothing you can do. Cars were not wanting to really do 2 stops here at Brands, and in trying to avoid that 2 stop, it just wasn't quite working. They were killing their tyres too quickly at the front, and I was in a world of trouble of my own on this final lap. I had tried to keep the tyres alive while going fast enough to stay ahead of the Nissan, but the tyre wear was starting to become a problem. And the more the tyres are worn, the quicker that they wear the rest of it away, and I just couldn't save them enough. As the Nissan was catching incredibly quickly on this final lap. I only had a few more corners to go. It really was not too fast to go at all, but with tyre wear up to about 95% on the Ford here, I knew I had nothing left to fight with. I could try and defend. I could try and defend against this Nissan, hope that he had murdered his tyres in the process of catching me, but he had gone. He had gone in the Ford. It was a valiant effort indeed from the SVT Cobra, having almost made it to the end of the race without having destroyed the tyres completely, but it wasn't going to be quite enough to fend off that Nissan. I wasn't the only one, though, in trouble, as I said. The cars further back, the RX-8 was up in 3rd place. However, the Mazda that had to two-stop at Sonoma was not working here either. That tyres were gone on the final lap. The Mustang that would then get past said RX-8 would also have his tyres. He inherited the 3rd place, but his tyres would go before the end of this race as well. You see them trying to get on the brakes, trying to slow down, trying to turn the cars. There's nothing. They're both off into the sand. And it would be the Nissan 240SX that would make the most of that opportunity and jump himself up into 3rd place. Good strategy from the 240 to have pitted late, had good enough tyres to make a late stop work, and could pick everyone else off. At the front, victory would go to the 370Z. I'm not sure his tyres were in great condition, judging by that understeer out of the final corner, but it were much better than mine. And, yeah, he would take a well-earned victory. The Nissan was stupid quick. I knew I didn't have the pace to fight with him or outright, so I did what I could. Just not quite enough to make it work. The Supra would also pick up a heap of positions on this final lap, with all the other vehicles struggling with grip. The Land Rover would equally run out of cornering. So yeah, the Supra would actually end up in 5th place. The Dodge Dart would make himself up into 4th here. It was, yeah, a fascinating event, fascinating strategies that went on here. At Lime Rock, the undercut worked out actually quite well for a number of cars if you had a bit of tyre life to last. Sonoma, if you could go the race without stopping, that would work out quite nicely. Undercut almost worked for me, but not quite. Here at Brands Hatch, the late stop, the Supra and the Nissan making that late stop work really very, very well, making up a heap of positions at the end of the race. Almost got it with the Ford. I have to say, you know, put in perspective how good that SVT Cobra was on its tyres. I almost made the race without having to stop. Cars that had stopped killed their tyres towards the end of their second stint. Admittedly, yes, I was taking it easy at times, and they would have been racing hard for position and so on. I was taking it easy for quite a lot of times, but yeah, tyre management, tyre strategy in this made it incredibly interesting. It's just something different to have to try and worry about. That, though, is going to be it for this video. If you would like to sign up to the next Versus the Community, you can via our forums. There's going to be a link in the description. It is going to be on Forza Horizon 3. We're going to go racing with A-Class Toyota Hiluxes against the Nissan Titan. You are going to need Blizzard Mountain, and of course you are going to... don't necessarily need Hot Wheels. If you want it on the Hilux, you're going to need Hot Wheels, but you will need Blizzard Mountain. We're going to be racing them at Blizzard Mountain because there's more off-road stuff to play around with out there. That's going to take place on the 25th of May. That, though, is going to be it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.